It's not rocket science to read out loud to your children. And the beauty of it is that we're being educated with our children. The big ideas and the love for beauty that comes when you feed your children a rich diet of literature and the books that we read and then talk about together shape our families.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked Podcast. I am your host, Cindy West, and I am very glad to be back with you again this week with Jennifer Pepito. But first, I would like to introduce you to this week's podcast sponsor, Apologia. If you're looking for a trusted homeschool resource to support your child's education with a strong biblical worldview, you will find it through Apologia. For decades, Apologia has been a go-to source for Christian homeschool curriculum designed to educate, inspire, and build a lifelong love of learning. They know that homeschooling isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. That's why they offer a growing catalog of resources to fit your family's needs. Dive into online self-paced courses, join live classes led by incredible instructors, or stream engaging video lessons anytime, anywhere. They even offer audiobooks perfect for learning on the go. Apologia will partner with you in your family's educational journey. Explore the full lineup of Apologia homeschool resources today at apologia.com and discover how they can help your family thrive. Apologia, equipping families, inspiring learners, and teaching truth. All right, welcome to the podcast, everybody, and welcome back, Jennifer Pepito. She and I chatted last time about habit training in your homeschool, and today we're going to take a little spin into books, living books. I mentioned last time that she and I both come from an eclectic Charlotte Mason style of education, but living books, the idea of living books isn't just for Charlotte Mason homeschoolers. So we're going to chat about that. Jennifer, welcome back. I would like you to introduce yourself this time through the lens of another book that you have written titled Mothering by the Book. How did that one come to be?
Oh, thanks so much, Cindy. I'm so honored to be here. And yes, I've been homeschooling for 27 years, and Mothering by the Book was almost like my opus. It was about how reading out loud to my children over many years of homeschooling helped me overcome fear. And each chapter in that book features a different living book that I read aloud with my children, or we read together and talked about, and the ways that the examples in that book helped me overcome a particular fear. For instance, reading the book Cheaper by the Dozen about a family of 12 children and how the father, who was an efficiency expert, trained habits in his children, helped me overcome the fear that I couldn't manage my own growing family. Or reading a book like Little House on the Prairie helped me overcome the fear of not having enough. So these beautiful books were all collected into this story of my life in so many ways, and the story of just some of the fears that had plagued me as a young mom. And living books, I adore this topic, Cindy, because in our last episode, we were talking about virtue. And in my mind, wonderful books is the best way to teach virtue to our children. It's not just about, will I give my kids a broader vocabulary than they would get from workbooks? It's not just about, will I make homeschooling more interesting to my children than I could through just giving them workbooks? It's about virtue, because when you read a story like Little Britches, where the father is just this example of diligence and caring for his family and teaching his son to be honest, and I mean, just the virtue that father showed in that book, and you read that grips our children, and it gives them a vision for how they could be. And I thought about this even in the light of my missionary journey, because we were missionaries in Mexico for 4 years, and that features big in the book Mothering by the Book. But we would never have had the confidence to be missionaries if we had not been reading missionary biographies and pioneer stories out loud to our children. And so in my mind, a living book shows your children what's possible. It shows them what virtue looks like. It shows them what resilience looks like. It gives them models and heroes to follow. And that's why I am extremely invested in helping families choose good books, because there's a lot of twaddle out there. Unfortunately, since, probably 2021 or so, a lot of modern books slip in deviant social values that most of us as Christian families don't share. And way before that, books and movies that were put out by more mainstream media or mainstream publishers had values like disrespect for parents, disrespect for adults, personal pleasure and personal satisfaction above the virtue of loving others or loving God. And so there's such an importance on what we bring to our table to serve our children in terms of ideas, in terms of values, in terms of virtue. And so, choosing the best books, living books. And there's a term that's often used in Charlotte Mason circles that they call some books twaddle. And twaddle would refer to, it's funny, even C.S. Lewis used that book. I'm reading his biography, Surprised by Joy, right now, his autobiography. And he even used that word twaddle to refer to poor quality books that have a lot of dialogue, books that do not exemplify virtue, books that are anti-hero or lacking a redemptive storyline. And sometimes it takes some practice to identify twaddle. But I think it's really important for us as families to identify, because our children, they need to be given beautiful ideas. Like C.S. Lewis, the way that he was able to write such deep and beautiful works and, Mere Christianity and the Out of the Silent Planet and the Narnia series, which we use in the Kind Kingdom and the Peaceful Press, those kinds of books came from him reading all the classics, reading, reading deeply and widely. And so then he was able to produce those kinds of works.
Oh, I love it. I love it. If there is one thing, there are a couple of foundational things that I stand on in homeschooling. And one of those is this idea of living books. Today is not my day for testimony, but if I had a testimony to give, I would testify about the change that living books made in our homeschool, the wonder that it brought, the encouragement that it brought, the academics that it brought, and like you just mentioned, the character training, the ability to believe in yourself, the ability to believe that you can do big things. All of those things can come easily through living books. And I'm so glad you mentioned that. But I think we need to, we're not necessarily talking to a Charlotte Mason audience today. So how can we help folks who don't necessarily continually incorporate living books into their curriculum? How can we help them to maybe do that here and there practically so that they can experience the beauty and joy and awesomeness of living books?
Yeah, I think just making a read aloud habit in your family, whether you homeschool Charlotte Mason or not, there are a lot of studies that suggest and confirm that reading aloud as a family has many benefits. And so just making it a habit, you could read one chapter a day. And if you can't read out loud, just put it on an audiobook. Like if you as a family could make a commitment to just sit together in the evenings or sit together in the morning, listen to one chapter at a time of a living book, there'd be so many benefits to your children. Their vocabulary would expand. My kids all scored really well on the SAT in that area of learning because of all the books we'd read out loud. And you can't get that through workbooks or vocabulary studies. You can't get that depth of ideas without books. And so, and particularly good books, quality books. And, there's so many lists available. My website, thepeacefulpress.com. I know, Cindy, you have lists. I'm sure that Schoolhouse Rocked has amazing lists. And so, finding those lists to go through as a family is just going to bring so much connection. Like a lot of our family identity also comes from these books that we've shared, these stories that we've shared. I remember one day we'd left my son to babysit the two younger siblings. He was maybe 14. And we came home and my husband didn't know where they were. He found them sitting in our tree fort and he was reading Tolstoy to his younger siblings. And, just the big ideas and the love for beauty that comes when you feed your children a rich diet of literature and the books that we read and then talk about together shape our families.
Yeah. So I love that. Whether you're beginning to introduce the idea of living books, or you're just now beginning to think about it, the idea of just putting on an audiobook, because some people are afraid to dive into these books. They are full of such rich vocabulary that sometimes it's difficult to just hand them over to a child who is learning to read or not reading super well. And sometimes parents can be very fearful of the idea of reading aloud. So an audiobook is a great place to start. I can't tell you how many years, you guys, we went with nothing in our car on except the audiobook that we were currently listening to. Years and years and years. And my kids have such good memories about that. We don't regret those moments going to guitar lessons and doctor's visits and all the places we go as homeschooling families with a book in our ear. But let's go to the idea of we want to get beyond an audiobook, but mom is a little afraid to, or dad, or whoever is homeschooling, they are a little afraid to actually read aloud. They don't feel confident in it. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think you just have to make it a habit. And this should really start with your preschoolers, of just reading simple, fun books like Miss Rumphius or Rocks a Box and some Oxcart Man. There's so many beautiful picture books. And when you've made it a practice in early childhood with picture books, then it's easy to transition into reading chapter books. But I think, choose books that are interesting for you to read out loud. And, in the Peaceful Press curriculum, we choose books that are fun to read out loud. Yes, they teach virtue. Yes, they have beautiful characters, but they're not going to bore you to tears to read them. And I think that's one thing that's maybe caused some people to burn out on a Charlotte Mason style homeschooling or a literature-based homeschooling, is when they're trying to read the list that maybe was being read in the 1800s or something. And those books are still valuable, but there are some books that might be slightly more engaging that can also teach those same concepts. There could be a geography textbook that you're slogging your way through, or you could read the Hauling Sea Hauling books about Men of the Mississippi, about a turtle going through the Mississippi River and all the lakes and experiences that he had. You could read even sometimes history textbooks. Like, for instance, a lot of people read Story of the World or Mystery of History. Those are great history resources, but you could just as easily read books about the time. Read The Count of Bubastes, or read Detectives in Togas, or read The Little House on the Prairie if you're studying American pioneers. Read Across 5 Aprils if you're studying the Civil War. Read The Freedom Train. There's so many really beautiful books that you could read and then do some timeline work or do some geography work to tie it together, instead of spending a lot of time reading things that bore you to tears, honestly. And even the Bible, like, if you're a Christian family listening, you should be reading the Bible to your children every day. It's going to be more impactful for them if you have not just read it to yourself, but also read it to them. And then you guys, you can read it, you can talk about it, but you don't even have to talk about it. Just read it. Let them absorb the content. But, if you make these small, simple practices, a simple practice of reading even just a Bible verse or a psalm, that's one of the things that I talk about in Habits for a Sacred Home. The Benedictines read the whole 150 Psalms every week, I think. It was like intense, like many Psalms a day even. But as modern Christian families, just read one Psalm a day for your children. Just start small, but start, because it's not rocket science to read out loud to your children. And the beauty of it, Cindy, is that we're being educated with our children. The holes in our education from not having a lot of literature or not having, engaging stories, the holes in our education is overcome as we're reading out loud to our children.
Homeschooling is a big responsibility. With BJU Press, you can feel equipped to give your children not just an education, but a foundation for life. Children learn in different ways, and BJU Press lets you adapt to their unique learning styles. And you'll love the community of other homeschool moms who use BJU Press. They've been where you are, and they're full of advice, encouragement, and practical tips. And when you need even more help, there's the Homeschool Hub, which keeps families organized with easy lesson planning, calendars, and even grading tools. To learn more, visit bjupresshomeschool.com.
Have you tried CTC Math yet with your child? Here's a testimonial from another happy homeschool mom. Amber said, I'm absolutely thrilled with CTC Math. It's a rare find that I've used with my children for more than 5 years now. I have 6 children using CTC Math, and each child has found it easy to navigate and very applicable. Thank you so much for all that you are doing in providing quality math lessons for my children. If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com. That's ctcmath.com.
Okay, so Jennifer, right before we stopped, you said the holes in our own education are being filled as we read living books with our kids. I 1,000,000% can attest to that. I will also say that for years of growing up, I absolutely hated the subject of history. I hated it. I thought it was terrible. I thought it was boring. And so I started reading living books in history to my children, with my children. We were listening to some in the car, and all of a sudden I'm going, oh, wowza, history is a pretty cool thing. And it was the living books that put me in the place and in the time to understand the significance of what was happening and the order in which it happened, where all of a sudden I was opened up to the world that history was not at all boring, and it was very cool. And it actually became one of my more favorite subjects to teach in all of my homeschooling.
Absolutely. Yeah. Same here. And for my children as well, because when you teach history through stories, it comes alive. One of my son's favorite books is Unbroken. And then he's also read Louis Zamperini's autobiography, The Devil at My Heels, which beautifully shows the journey of faith that he took. And so when you read books like that, it makes everything more vivid. My son was interested then to learn more about the Pacific Theater during World War II and to learn more about the events and the characters and who was in charge during that time. But when you just read a textbook, it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. And so these stories, they really make history come alive for us.
You know, we're talking about reading and incorporating some living books, even if it's just 15 minutes before bed, or 15 minutes to start the day after you have your Bible time or something. I have found that reading and listening to good literature translate incredibly well to writing. Have you found that as well?
Absolutely. And it's interesting. Like I said, I'm reading about C.S. Lewis right now. And in his last few years of high school, that's all he did was read. And then he was able to, graduate with a triple degree from Oxford. But what he was doing was reading, and then having to discuss it. He had a tutor during those years who was very interested in making sure he knew what he believed and why. And so he wasn't allowed to just say, oh, I thought the book was interesting. Like he had to sort of give a case. And the book Hero Education by Oliver DeMille talks a lot about this way of teaching our children, where we read books together and we talk about it. And as you are narrating, that's just the art of telling back what you read, or writing down what was read to you. As you do that, as you summarize and narrate and discuss what was read, then your writing skills improve because you're taking in the best of writing, and then you're expressing it yourself in your own words. You're summarizing, you're rephrasing, but it's coming out with more vocabulary. And you're looking at, like, I just read a book by Sally Clarkson's daughter, who was educated in the UK, I think it's St. Andrews, but her writing has so many more words than a lot of modern, like, Christian nonfiction. And you can tell that she both read a lot and then was in a culture where reading and words were important. And so it's like the broadness of vocabulary creates more depth in what you're learning.
Absolutely. I have found that so much that books are actually how I chose to teach my children how to write. I had them watch over years and years, but then in particular, master authors, and I had them just replicate. And that replication often started through storytelling or narration or oral telling of stories, and then transitioned right into writing. So, for folks who are like, okay, maybe we'll read a little bit of living literature. I hope that we have helped you through this to understand that this is This is something that could be pretty cool into all different kinds of subject areas if you will give good books a chance. Have you found that reading books with your children, I know you mentioned that it is something that your entire family culture, everyone has memories around those. I will say the same for my family. Can you remember any times where a book prompted some kind of amazing discussion that otherwise you might not have had, or it might have felt a little weird to have that discussion? Can you think of an example?
Absolutely. I mean, I especially can remember when we were doing the Kind Kingdom, which is the Peaceful Press European history resource. We read the Narnia books out loud. And several times over that year, we had amazing discussions, reading The Last Battle. And at the same time, we were studying the Cold War and communism, and just seeing how there was so many twisting of ideas and twisting of thoughts, and so much duplicity and treachery, really. And you could see that both in the culture of communism as well as in the book The Last Battle. So many beautiful conversations came out of that. And then reading The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and there's the scene where I've said this on several podcasts, the scene in the book where Repeat Sheep is saying, like, even if my boat sinks, I will continue eastward towards Aslan. Like, there was this hunger in Repeat Sheep for God, basically. And so as we read that, our hearts were moved and stirred as well. So our faith was strengthened through these books we were reading. And it was interesting also in the C.S. Lewis book I'm reading, how he said he was turned off to God. His heart had been hardened to God, but he read a book by George MacDonald, and there was just a spark of faith that then became the foundation in some sense of his renewal, or probably his first time with faith, because I don't think he ever really had faith as a child.
Awesome. I can tell you all the way from toddlers to teenagers, living books have sparked amazing discussions and amazing opportunities to maybe highlight some character flaws without necessarily having to point out a character flaw, if you know what I mean. You're somebody to notice something in a book and go, oh, wow, that's familiar. Maybe I ought to think about that. I've noticed that happen many times over too. So anyway, Jennifer, thank you for being with us again. Could you please remind us where to find you and where to find Mothering by the Book?
Yes, if you go to thepeacefulpress.com, you can find all my resources linked. You can also connect with me more personally on my Instagram, Jennifer Pepito, or The Peaceful Press.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. These have been excellent discussions. If you had one book you wanted to suggest, or one author that you're like, start with this one, which one would you suggest?
Yeah, it is really hard. There's several that came through my head. For families just getting started with reading aloud, I would say the Little House on the Prairie books or Barbara Cooney picture books. If you are, as a family wanting to deepen your faith, The Chronicles of Narnia is a beautiful series to read aloud.
Yeah.
And then as a mother, books by Elizabeth Googe have really shaped my faith in many ways and highlighted just the beauty of holiness, the beauty of a life in Christ.
Okay, awesome. Jennifer and I both hope that you will go and start reading some awesome living literature with your kids. And you guys can find me at ourjourneywestward.com. I am also Mrs. Cindy of the No Sweat Nature Study podcast and the No Sweat Nature Study science classes. So you can find me over there too. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you'll tune in next week for another great episode of the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast.
You're listening to the Biblical Family Network.
Hey, I'm Miki.
And I'm Will.
And we're the co-hosts of the Culture Proof Podcast. We want to invite you to join us every week as we discuss what's happening in the world and then filter those happenings through a decidedly biblical lens.
There are many questions, especially when we see what's happening in our culture today, but the answers are found within the Word of God. So that's where we want to look.
Amen. When we resist those cultural trends that rival the truth,
we remain culture proof.
It feels like whiplash for people because they're like, wait, Greta's posting like pictures of the hummingbird in her backyard, laying eggs and building her nest, and then fight porn. Like, what is going on with this woman? But I think there's actually a really important lesson there, because what I try to encourage parents to do is to say that pornography and talking to your kids about it shouldn't be this big, looming, dark, overwhelming thing that we have to sit down and have this terribly frightening talk with our kids. Instead, it should be like, hey, wow, look at this beautiful nest that this hummingbird is making, and that she's built it with her beak. Like, isn't that incredible, God's design? And wow, just like he designed our bodies, every part of our bodies for a purpose, and our bodies are made in his image. And oh yeah, remember we talked about pornography and it's something that is bad and it takes and distorts God's good things? Well, yeah, I just want you to remember that. So it sounds crazy to juxtapose those two things, but really when we normalize the conversation of pornography with our kids, it becomes less scary. It takes away the power of pornography and instead gives the power back to God, which he has the power anyways, right?